Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Book and Game Festival Kūrybiška, where authors connect readers. We have a special surprise for you today from Germany. Please meet Karl Olsberg, a German author who writes thrillers and children's books. His books, Boy in a White Room and Girl in a Strange Land, was published also in Lithuania by the Dasų Ganyklos. Hello, Karl.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here, if only virtually, but we live in a virtual world, so to speak, especially in the Corona times. So I think it's great to be able to talk to everyone here, and I'm very happy to be here and answer your questions.
Yes, it's actually, we have a really good opportunity to talk even virtually. It's sad that we can't meet in person, but maybe one day we will meet, and you also will meet your Lithuanian readers.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, so it's an honor for me to talk with you. And as I know, you wrote your PhD on artificial intelligence. You have worked as a management consultant, game designer, founded 3 startups, and you wrote even more than 10 books. And most of your books are about the future, artificial intelligence, games, evolution. Tell me more about your relationship with artificial intelligence and why do you write books about it?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. It's actually, like you said, it's a very long relationship, so to speak. I began being interested in the topic even when I was a child, when I read my first science fiction books, and of course they were talking robots and artificial brains and everything. But that was very far in the future then. But as I grew older, and you can see that I have grown a few years, I have seen this become reality more and more and more. And 20 years ago, I founded a startup which was developing chatbot technology. You know, chatbots, they're all over the internet today. At the time, it was something really new, really unique. And of course, what we were doing, we were kind of automating dialogues which were being taken by humans before. And I started thinking about what that really meant, what it really meant to automate something which humans did before, and how this would affect the people talking to our chatbots. And there were interesting things we could see. For example, people were sometimes not even realizing that they were talking to a machine. They thought, we had inputs like, no, you can't be a machine, you're lying, you're a human, no machine can talk that well. That was 20 years ago, so you can imagine how good chatbots are today. It's impossible sometimes to distinguish them from humans, and of course that does something to us. We live in a world where it's getting harder and harder to see the reality behind everything. That's probably the reason why so many people don't take the coronavirus for serious, for example, or other strange, mysterious conspiracy theories like QAnon and other things, which I really can't imagine how somebody could really think this is true. But in a world where you can never be sure whether what you see on the internet is reality or not, of course, you can come up with strange ideas, and of course, it's easy to mistake reality for fake and fake for reality. It's happening more and more often. And in my books and in my life, so to speak, I'm asking all this one question all the time: what does it do to us, and how can we deal with it? Because it's getting more and more and more, and it's getting more important for the future, I think. So artificial intelligence is quite a broad scope, but I think the most important thing is how does it change humans and the way humans see the world. And that's happening already. We don't have to wait for Terminator-like scenarios where robots fight humans. We already have tons of artificial intelligence algorithms changing the way we think, changing the way we act on the internet and everything. So it's here today.
Yeah, I can imagine that you have a huge community of fans who love like artificial intelligence, they like sci-fi thrillers or other topics about future, because yes, in your books, really like when I also read about your other books, they are really connected with artificial intelligence and all the topics you're talking right now. And I would like to ask about Karl Olsberg. As I know, it's your pen name. So why did you choose this name? And is your kind of privacy not, you don't want to show your real name, or what is the secret?
No, there's absolutely no secret about my real name. It's even on Wikipedia. My real name is Karl Ludwig von Wendt. And you can already hear that this is quite difficult to pronounce in different languages. So one reason for having a pen name is simply simplicity. Karl Olsberg is much easier to pronounce and to remember and everything. So that was one reason. Another reason was that I was working as a management consultant at the time when I published my first book. And I thought it would be a good idea to differentiate between my fictional self, so to speak, and the wild things I wrote about, and the real guy who was doing consultant work, real world work, very fact-based on the other hand. So I thought it would be a good idea to have a pen name for the writing. And the reason why I chose Karl Olsberg, Karl is my real first name, so it's easier for me when I talk to somebody, they can call me just Karl. And the second reason is Olsberg is a small rural town in the middle of Germany where I grew up. So that's, so to speak, it's linked to my hometown.
Yeah, that's a nice story. I didn't know about that small town, so it's really nice that you connected it with your personality. So let's talk about your book. And I want to present your first book, which was published in Lithuania in September. So it's your first Lithuanian book. We call it
Berniukas. Very proud of that.
Yes, and this book has got many awards. Like it was nominated for German Young Adult Literature Award, Seraph Award, Ulmal Unke Award, also Young Adult Literature Prize, Golden Leslie. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right because most of them are in German, but like there are really many awards. We can see it in here. And was it a surprise for you? How did you feel about that? This book got such a success.
I was, of course, really, really surprised. I will never forget the moment when I got a call from the jury of Deutscher Literaturpreis, German Young Literature Award, when they informed me that I was nominated. That's the biggest honor I ever received. It's similar to a writer like getting an Oscar nomination for an actor. So it was really, really amazing, especially because that was in a week where I had some bad news concerning a business I was running. So I could really use it. And I was really, really happy about it. It was not even whether I finally won the award or not. I didn't, but just being nominated is really a huge honor, and I'm very proud of that. And of course, all those other nominations as well, because when you write, it's kind of a lonely job. You just I actually write for myself. I write stories which I would like to read, and when I write them, I get much deeper into them as if I was just reading what somebody else had written. So it's really an amazing experience. I love it. And when then readers like my stories, when publishers even pay me for them, and then I get prizes, that's paradise. It's the best job I can imagine, really. So that is, of course, something very rewarding, very good for me. And of course, I also write books which don't get any prizes and are not even very much loved by the readers. So it's always good to see that once in a while it works.
Yes, and I think like every author has their fans and also not fans. But yes, this topic is really, really interesting. And while I was reading this book, I was really like catched up, and I wanted to continue to read it because it has really interesting storyline. It changes, surprises you all the time. Mm-hmm. So please, Karl, could you tell our listeners what is this book about?
Actually, it starts with the topic I just mentioned before, kind of the virtual world we live in. A young boy wakes up in a white room with no exit, with no windows, with nothing to find out where he is and how he got there. He has no remembering of anything. So his task in a way is to find out, how did I get to here, and who am I really? Because he doesn't know who he is. And of course, during the book, he figures out to get some information about the outside world, how he got in there. And like you said before, once in a while, he thinks he knows, and then it turns out, no, that wasn't the real truth. Until the end, when I surprise some readers, and some say, "Oh no, I couldn't really believe that." No, that was so surprising. I'm not sure whether I believe that. But that's fine. The idea in this book is not to surprise readers all the time, but to show how difficult it is to find out what reality is. And this goes back to 400 years. I was inspired by for this book by René Descartes, a French philosopher who 400 years ago imagined some kind of virtual reality. Of course, he didn't have the term, but he imagined some kind of spirit who only created the world as an imagination, as an illusion. And he said, okay, if I can never be sure what I see is real, what do I know? And he came up with very little. He came up with cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That's the only thing he really knew for sure, that he exists. Everything else is up for speculation. And that's the world we live in today. If you go into the internet, you can see videos of people doing things, and you can never be sure whether this is real or not, whether they really said that or not. It's very easy to deep fake videos today, to make politicians say things they never said before, and all kinds of fake things. You don't even need much technology. You can just spread some rumor about someone on Twitter, and it has huge resonance and gets multiplied, and people believe it, even if it's the biggest crap. So that's the world we live in. And my book, in a way, mirrors that by focusing on one boy in one specific situation, but he has the same difficulty finding out what's real and what's not.
Yes. It's a very interesting story. Actually, while I was reading, I thought that I'm watching like movie Inception or The Matrix, and actually there are some parallels with
absolutely, yes,
The Matrix and other stories. So I would like to ask you, why did you choose The Matrix, Alice in the Wonderland, Lord of the Rings, these kind of really popular movies in your book?
That is also a very personal thing, because I love all those stories. I love Alice in Wonderland. It's one of the most brilliant books ever written, in my opinion. It's so deep, so full of humor, so full of wild imagination, and of course it's been filmed a couple of times, and it has inspired so many people. It's brilliant, and of course I had to use it. Like the movie Matrix you mentioned, I reference that as well. But the movie in turn references Alice in Wonderland with this famous scene where one of the actors has a white rabbit on her shoulder. So that's the symbol for virtual reality, so to speak, or for simulation reality. And I really love that. So by using the same symbol, the same stories, I kind of bow before all the people who have written about the same topic or have created movies about it before me. And of course, I'm not the first one, but I try to see things from a different angle sometimes, or put it more into the real world of today. Because when The Matrix came out, that was all science fiction. Today, we live in a world where much of what was shown in The Matrix is not really science fiction anymore.
Yes, I agree with you. And I really like the idea in the book that you present that every year computers start doubling their speed, and they are getting faster and faster in double time. So yeah, I'm really keen to know, do you believe that those kind of experiments, virtual worlds, what was written in this book about our experiments with our bodies, is it going to happen also in the future, which you're writing about?
I think so, yes, absolutely. There will be the doubling of computing power will go on for a time. It's not clear how far it can really go, but we have a lot of technology which we haven't really exploited, and we are not even close to something close to the human brain in this same kind of space, in the same kind of energy consumption. So there's lots of room, at least in a physical sense, for improving our current computers, and that will happen. I don't know. It's hard to see into the future and to know how fast it will go, but I'm very sure that within the next couple of decades, we will have computers with the power of the human brain, and also with the ability to realize that they are computers in the real world, and to understand what the real world is, and to see things not like today's artificial intelligence, just being able to recognize the difference between a cat and a dog in a picture, but really to understand what a cat and a dog is. And when we have that, that will be quite interesting, because then we will have computers which are much more powerful than us, much more intelligent than us, and it will be quite a challenge to make them do what we want them to do, if we even know what we want them to do. It's a very difficult topic, actually, and many smart people are working on it currently, but nobody has found a solution yet, and that's a little bit reason for concern, I think.
And do you think artificial intelligence is good for humanity or not? Because maybe they're going to be even smarter than us in some years.
Yeah, they certainly will be smarter than us, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I like to say, our problem is not artificial intelligence, our problem is human stupidity, because human stupidity will be what tells artificial intelligence what to do. It's already there. Already we have artificial intelligence being used for manipulating people, for influencing people to buy things they don't need, for doing all kinds of stupid things. Given the fact that we have global warming, we should probably slow down a little bit with our consumption. But the people who owning the artificial intelligence want the opposite. They want us to buy more, to buy faster, and everything. So this is definitely going in the wrong direction, but it's not the problem that we have artificial intelligence. The problem is how we use it. And that's one reason why I write books about it, to make people think about it, to make people think, what do I want with artificial intelligence? I don't want probably a bot which controls my whole life without me having any control anymore. But what can I do to prevent that?
So it's this kind of like a message to young adults, and also for them, for other readers, to know more about what can happen in the future. So what would you wish for them, like in these days? What kind of connection, relationship to have with this artificial intelligence or machines?
I'm not afraid of technology, I must say that. I'm not anti-technology. Sometimes if you read my books, you can say, oh, you could think that I'm afraid of technology, but I'm not. I founded a couple of startups. I'm programming myself. I love technology. I use it every day. I have tons of Alexas in my house, and I like that really much. But I'm also concerned about it. And I think that's the important thing, not to say artificial intelligence is good or bad, but to say, like I just said, what do we do with it? How do we approach it? Can we make sure that it's not abused? For example, one aspect of artificial intelligence that really concerns me is that it distributes power in the wrong way. It makes some very few people much more powerful, and most of us less powerful, instead of the other way around. And that's something we have to fight against. There are possibilities to fight against it. And for example, the European Union is doing a lot to keep that in check. But it's something we have to actively want. We have to actively fight against some companies owning all our data, knowing everything about us, reading our minds literally. They know so much about us and controlling us subtly, sending us messages, making us do things we wouldn't really want to do if we really thought about it, and instead making sure that artificial intelligence is for us, is in our best interest. And I think that especially young readers are the ones who have to make that happen, because all of my readers are the ones who will be in my age when probably when computers are smarter than them. And on the way to that moment, they have a lot of opportunity to change things, to influence things. For example, to make politicians create laws that limit the way big companies can use that artificial intelligence to influence us, to manipulate us without us knowing.
Yes, so I think that message you really puts it really good in a nice way in this book. And actually, the end of the story, when the main character Manuel, he was in that kind of situation that I didn't really expect it. Actually, I really like detectives, and most of the times I predict what is going to happen. But this story, it was it's a real hard story to understand. So probably some even readers, they were shocked and what's going on with the end. But how did you come up with this idea to make this kind of end, and why did you choose to write in this way?
Of course, I cannot talk too much about the ending of the story because that would spoil the fun for some readers. But usually when you write a book like that, you know the end before you know anything else. So in this case, I knew exactly the end, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know all the things that happened in between. I had this idea of the white room and what would come out in the end as a real explanation, but all those steps in between I had to think about. So that's the way you work as a writer. Often. Sometimes I start writing and I have no idea how the story is going to end. But in cases like this one, I knew the end and I didn't know what would happen until the end. How would I bring it about, so to speak?
Yes, thank you very much about this sharing. And actually, one of our readers, he read this book and we asked his opinion about it. We made even a video with him. Later on, you could see it on our YouTube channel, the Besutave. And he even said that this book now it's his favorite book after then just after Harry Potter. So now you are even competing with Harry Potter.
Wow, that's an honor, of course. Well, I like Harry Potter as well. I read it to my boys when they were smaller and really loved all the magic, all the fun in the books, the way John Rowling created this world. So I probably could have used Harry Potter in my book, but I was afraid to do it because of copyright issues. Lord of the Rings is a little bit easier because most of it is already quite aged and many people have used it in their books. So I felt more comfortable referencing to the Lord of the Rings than I would have felt creating scenes out of the Harry Potter universe.
Okay, and now I want to present the second book of the trilogy because there are 3 books about this topic. And it's A Girl in a Strange Land, Mergaitė keistoje šalyje. And how did you come up with an idea to write the second book? Did you know that you're going to write the trilogy from the beginning, or it came just later?
It came later. I had no idea no intention to write a trilogy. I thought that Boy in the White Room was in itself a closed story. But when I saw that it was successful, and my publisher asked me whether I could write a sequel, I was thinking about, no, I cannot really write a sequel, but I can approach the same kind of story from a different angle. And that was the idea for Girl in a Strange Land. In this case, it's a similar topic. It's about a girl who doesn't really understand the world she lives in, but in a very different setting. It's not a virtuality, it's not a white room, but instead she lives in a very closed community of highly religious people who think or who tell her that they are living in the end times. The Satan's armies are roaming free on the world, and they are the last survivors, and it's a closed village in southern Germany, in the Alps. So this girl really thinks that there's nothing out there. There's no technology world out there. She doesn't even know technology. All they have is some cars and almost nothing. She doesn't have any TV or anything like that, and she thinks she lives in a totally different world than she actually does. And then one day she leaves that valley and discovers the real world, the technology world. So in a way, she has a similar journey to what Manuel experiences in his situation, but from the other side, she discovers the world, a future world, step by step, and is amazed by all the technology she encounters. I imagine that it would be similar if we could build a time machine and jump 30 or 40 years into the future and then run around and see all those things and say, wow, what's that? I mean, just imagine, I remember 40 years ago, in the 80s, beginning of the 80s, when I bought my first computer, it had 16 kilobytes of RAM. It's hard to imagine that something like that was called a computer at the time, but it really was state of the art then. And when I think back at that time, there were no smartphones, no mobile phones even. It was a totally different world in a way. Of course, many things were also very similar to today. So I tried to imagine this kind of future scenario, and this girl discovers it step by step and finally ends up in a virtual world as well.
Yes, and I actually, when I would start to read, I thought that it's going to be like totally solo story that you can read just alone without reading the first part. But then I found some things that are connected with the first part, and it's about the year. It's 2057. And I'm going to tell one spoiler, really small spoiler, that in the second book, Manuel has also a role in it. So I wanted to ask you, why did you choose exactly that year, 2057?
I'm not sure whether there was a... there were actually two reasons. One reason was it was about the same, or about the right path into the future, far enough away so that I could imagine some things which are not really close to being real today, but also not that far that would be totally unimaginable. And also, the first book published with my name on it was actually a book called 2057. And it was about it wasn't not really a book by me, but it was a book which was written after a German TV series, a documentation series, which was trying to tell some stories about the future, and that came out in 2007. So they tried to imagine the world 50 years from now. And when I wrote Girl in a Strange Land, it was 10 years later, so it was quite closer to those 50 years. And already in those 10 years, a lot of things had happened, which the authors of that series had seen much farther into the future. So it was interesting to see that we are picking up speed, and probably many of the things they envisioned will be old hat by then. So that was the reason for this particular year.
That's really an interesting story, because it was really strange for me. Why this kind of particular year? Because it's like 57. Why? And from now on, it looks really close. And
Yes.
maybe, yeah, it's going to change in that way that you're writing it in those books. And also about Manuel, he is going to show in the third book, Boy in a Dead End?
Yes and no. I intended to write all three books as closed books in themselves. So you can read them out of order if you want. You can read each one of them without knowing the others. And of course, they are connected. They play in the same universe, so to speak. Of course, the characters, or at least the settings, are coming up in each of the books. So you have some links, but they can be read independently. And in the third book, Boy in the Dead End, is actually a prequel, so a book which is placed before the other two, and explains the background story to Boy in the White Room. In this case, I would recommend that you read Boy in the White Room first and Boy in the Dead End, like it's called, after it. But for example, you don't have to necessarily read Girl in Strange Land as well. But of course, if you're not interested in the other two books, you can only read Boy in the Dead End, and it works for itself too.
Yeah, that's nice, really nice story, because I really like those kind of links between them, and they're kind of hidden. So, but you can still understand the story without reading the other books. And coming back to this book, Girl in a Strange Land, in this book, the religious community that Sophia, the main character, is living in, does it have any analogs or to the communities in our world in these days?
Mm-hmm. There are some similar very religious communities, like the Amish people in the US, for example, which don't use technology, or no modern technology, at least. They don't use computers, for example, and they think technology is a bad thing. And in a way, I understand that, I hope it becomes clear when you read the book that I don't hate religion. I'm not a religious person, but I don't think religion is necessarily a bad thing. I think it depends, like with technology, it depends what you do with it. If you use religion to suppress people, to build an autocracy like we have today in many countries, that's a bad thing. If you use religion to inspire people, to make people be friendly to each other, that's a good thing. So in this case, in this story, religion is more a bad thing, probably because people are suppressed. There are bad people that use religion to suppress others. But the girl itself, she's religious, but she's a good girl, and she uses her view of the world in a positive way, and even manages in the third book, there's also the same religious community playing a role, and she even manages to give a very important insight to my main character from her religious point of view, even though it's about technology. So I don't think those are totally different topics. I think they are related, and what we probably need is more dialogue between religious people and people who are not religious, and how to think about the same topics.
Yes, actually, as you said, I think religion really helped the girl to go on to discover that world that she feels strange. And actually, there was one idea that I really liked about religion that she read in one of the books she was reading, that the religion can be in any kind. If people created that to be more religious and to be more kind, as you told us before. And it doesn't matter in who you believe, but just believing and being a good person, a kind person, is the main thing. So I think that's really nice message to the all young adult readers. And also about this book, I want to ask about the dream world, because it has really important role in this story. And what do you want to say to readers about this virtual dream world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also something which has two sides. For example, I have my own VR headset, and I love it. I really love to spend time in the virtual world. And actually, I'm looking forward to the technology I describe in that book, where we can really enter that virtual world much more like as if you were really there. I think it's a great thing, but of course, it's also a dangerous thing. Like every technology, it has two sides. And the danger here is that it can pull you too far away from reality. And reality is, of course, the thing which is most important to us, because real change only happens in reality. If you spend too much time in the virtual world and forget reality, then bad things will happen. There are people who are addicted to playing computer games, for example, and that has really bad implications for their personal lives. They lose their jobs. They don't get ahead in their studies, for example, and that's a bad thing, like any addiction. So too much virtual reality is as bad as having none at all, at least, and losing contact to reality is a danger I see with all the technology. I mean, you don't have to have a VR headset for that. I often see, when I walk through the park here in the vicinity, I see mothers with their children, and the mothers are looking on their smartphone, and the children are tugging on their skirt or on their hands and trying to get their attention, but they continue looking on their smartphone. That's a really bad thing, I think.
Yes. There are so many topics that I want to ask you about, because there are so many discussed and analyzed in these books. One of those also are fake news. What you can suggest to your young readers who are reading these books?
Well, I think since Donald Trump, it should be very, very obvious that we are living in a world where fake news of all kinds are manipulating many, many people, and many, many people believe that. It's really terrible, I think. My best example is the flat earthers. There are people who really believe that the world is flat, and they try even to prove that. There's a nice Netflix documentation about it. They have a website, flatearthers.org or something. I don't know exactly. You can look that up, and they are serious. They really believe the world is flat. I mean, it's very easy to see that it's not the case, but they still believe it. And that's only one example of the many, many myths and misinformation that's out there. It's getting worse. It's getting worse by the day, because it's easier to fake news, and all the algorithms which feed us with news don't distinguish between reality and fake news. So that's probably the explanation why so many people still believe that the US election was somehow manipulated by the Democrats, and all the nonsense that Trump was telling them. And I think it's extremely important in this world to not forget that there is a reality. We have tons of fake news and tons of virtuality and everything, but somewhere beneath that is reality. There's only one reality, and we cannot stop searching for it. It's getting more difficult to see what's real and what's not, but we cannot stop looking for it. And that's my message to all the young people out there. Don't stop looking for the real reality. And if you hear something, especially if you want it to be true, be skeptical. Look behind it. Really go to a fact checker site, for example, and look it up. I have made this mistake myself. Oftentimes I even used some kind of fact from the internet as kind of research, and then I said, wait a minute, is that really true? And I looked it up and I found out, no, it wasn't. It's very easy to stumble across this kind of fake news. And it's critically important that we don't stop looking for the real truth. Like a detective in a novel. No, it's probably not the gardener who really killed the guy. You have to look behind the scenes. You have to look at every detail. And in the end, it turns out it's somebody else who was the real killer. That's the challenge we have today. And that's what I try to encourage with my books.
Yes, I think it's really easy to get into that rabbit hole, into those fake news and all this information that is around us. And I think that the quote, I am because I think, really helps in this way, because everything what you hear, you can check and you can think and you can check it twice, three times, or even more. I also want to ask about the boy in that dead end. We still don't have it in Lithuania, but maybe we will have it. And I would like you to present it for our readers. What is going this book about? Because I think it's about the manual prehistory, or I'm not right.
Yes, it's about manual, and I won't go into the details how this is related to the manual in Boy in the White Room, but the manual in the third book is about 15 years old, and he has a very severe illness. I can't even pronounce it correctly. So it's the same illness that Stephen Hawking had, the famous physician who had spent most of his life in a wheelchair and couldn't even talk in the end. But he grew 75 years old, which Manuel unfortunately will not reach this age, because in his case, the illness is much more aggressive and much quicker. So he only has about a half year, maybe a year to live. And then he gets the offer to get his brain transferred into a computer, which is something which even companies offer for real today. I mean, not that they are really able to do it, but they offer you for a tremendous amount of money. You can freeze your brain when you die, and they promise you that one day they will be able to transfer you into a computer, which is of course nonsense. But many people have this kind of idea. Elon Musk even talked about it and said he thinks one day we will be able to do that. And in my book, this Manuel must decide whether he wants to pursue that or not, and whether that's even a good idea. And that's, I think it's a philosophical question of some relevance and also very interesting. Would I really want to live in a computer forever? Is eternity a good idea? That's one of the questions I ask in that book. And I have my own answer, but I invite readers to find their answer for themselves.
That's really nice. I can't wait to read it. So probably it's going to be in Lithuanian or in English, which I could read. And actually, we have also few questions from our readers. We asked them before if they want to ask you something. And one of those questions is, do you have some idol authors that inspired you to write this trilogy or any other book?
Yeah, of course. I actually have a couple of authors which I really, really like. For example, the German Andreas Eschbach is also a science fiction author, which I really love. For children's books, my favorite author of all time is Michael Ende, also Erich Kästner, both German authors which have some international renown, I think. I love Astrid Lindgren, for example. So there are many, many inspiring authors which I use. One real author which I really like for the books of younger children, which I also write, is René Goscinny, the author of Asterix. I don't know how popular Asterix is in Lithuania, but it's very, very popular in Germany. And the author who invented these characters, who died I think 30 years ago or so, is really, really brilliant. I love his stories. I read one of his stories every night before going to sleep because they are so funny and so lovely, even though they are 50 years old. So there's a lot of inspiration, of course, out there, and it just is not one specific author or one specific way of writing that I like, but I read many very different things, and so I get inspired from very different authors of all kinds of literature styles, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Then other question, how much time it took for you to write A Boy in a White Room?
Usually I try to write about 1,000 words a day, which is around about 3 pages. And so it took me, I think, about close to 3 months to write it, including some time I needed for thinking through the story, researching a little bit, and also some time for going through it again and correcting it. But that's, of course, not everything. Then the publisher gets a book, somebody reads it again, an editor, and asks me questions and corrects things. And so there's still some work to be done. All in all, it takes about half a year to 3/4 of a year to write such a book.
It's quite a long time. And do you give your book, like the draft, to read to someone else if they can give you some opinion, or you're doing it just by yourself?
No, actually, I have one test reader, which is my wife. And my wife has 2 remarkable skills, so to speak, or which qualify her for it. One is she never reads fiction, aside from my own. So she only likes to read real world stories like biographies or books by people who have share their own life experience. So she's perfect for as a proofreader for fiction because she has no predefined concept of what good fiction should look like, and also she's really awfully honest to me. She writes things like on the margin of my books like, do I really have to finish reading this, or this is total crap, and things like that. And I have in more than one case I have thrown away 200 pages and rewritten them, and in one case I even stopped thinking about a book which I already had finished because she didn't like it, and I said, she's right. She's always right. That's the problem. She's my wife, after all. So she's really helpful, and really she also liked Boy in the White Room very much. So I knew that book must be good because she has a good feeling for what readers will like as well. Other than that, of course I have my editor at Löwe Verlag who helps me a lot getting the book right, and then the readers finally.
Yeah, it's really nice to have this kind of critics that even you wrote a book and you're not even wanted to publish it after your wife's review. And well, the last question from our readers is, how do you feel about that your books are published also not in Germany, but also in other countries? And it's not the only books that are published, but there are even more.
Yes, that makes me very, very proud, of course. I mean, it's a dream of any author to reach as many readers as possible. But language barriers, of course, very difficult because it has a lot of work to be done to translate a book, to publish it, and everything. And I'm really, really grateful to you as a publisher to take time to go through my book, to really put work into it and to publish it in your language. That's really an honor for me. So it's fantastic to see my own book. I always laugh when I get a mail with a book where my name is written on it, but I can't read the title because it's in a language I don't speak. Like in this case, it's really a great feeling.
That's nice. So publishers, don't sleep and catch up this best-selling author, Karl Olsberg.
Yeah, please do so, yes.
And yes, this book series of the trilogy is really good for all the young readers who like artificial intelligence. They are really interested in science fiction, about future virtual world. So I really, really recommend these books and other Karl Olsberg books for these readers. And for those who are listening, if you want to hear even more interviews with our authors, illustrators, or maybe sometime we have another discussion with Karl Olsberg, you can watch it on our YouTube channel, Debesų TV, and don't forget to subscribe. So, Karl, thank you so much for this talk. It was a pleasure for me to talk with you, and maybe till the next time.
Yeah, thank you very much too. It was a pleasure for me as well, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for the great questions also. Yeah, I hope that readers will enjoy the books, and maybe we can one day meet in person. I would like to visit your country one day. I've heard it's very beautiful, so maybe there will be an opportunity later. I'm very proud that I have been here, virtually at least, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you too. Thank you, all the listeners, and especially for Karl Olsberg. Goodbye.
Bye.